Hey everyone, my name is Eric Johnson, and my research is on identifying students with behavioral problems and how we can create services in the public school system to address these students with behavioral problems. We've heard a lot about the current state of the public education system in America, how it's declined over the years, and this is true. It was not too long ago that the United States was undisputed number one ranking in the world as far as public education goes. We slowly fell off. There's been many theories and hypotheses talked about of why this has happened. And one of these reasons I think this has happened are behavioral problems in the school. And some of the research questions I had are, what are some common behavioral problems in the school? And things that kept coming up were bullying, sexual harassment, gang activity, and just overall violence in the schools. Also had a research question of what causes these behavioral problems. Another question I have are, what are some solutions that we can create to address these problems? I think my research is truly interdisciplinary in nature because there has been no solution thus far that has solved the growing trend of behavioral problems in school. So I use three disciplines to conduct my research. The first discipline I use is sociology, also use psychology, and finally I use political science. Sociology is huge in discussing this problem because sociology deals with how we interact with our community and the external forces that influence us. We had Nielsen, Turner, and Bower in 2014 had a study on how groups influence individual behavior of children. Their research focused on descriptive and injunctive norms. Descriptive norms are actions most taken by a group, and injunctive norms are actions expected to be taken. They found that children most often use descriptive norms. This means peer pressure is real. I think we've all faced peer pressure in our life sometimes. I know I have. Sometimes I feel like I did the right thing. Sometimes I think that I allowed a group to negatively influence me, but that's my fault. But I just think we've all been there before. Um, this explains to me also the descriptive norms. Also explains gang activity to me. Okay, say you have a kid that's living in a neighborhood, and there's a lot of gang members around. This child, he or she, is more likely to engage in gang activity themselves more so than a child who has never ever been introduced to any gang activity. Swan's 2010 research showed that gang members are more likely to use drugs, get into fights, and engage in risky behavior than children who are not in gangs. Sociology is also helpful in identifying students with behavioral problems by examining the family. Huffman, 2013, details how family disruptions negatively affect a child's education. Family disruptions include things like domestic violence, divorce, and this also goes back to what I was previously talking about, how a student uses descriptive norms to act out their behavior. Say a kid grows up in a home where his father beats his wife. Okay, of course, this kid may grow up and say, I witnessed my father beat my mother. I will never let this happen again. But there are also children who see this and they ended up engaging in that same behavior themselves. It's kind of like the cycle, a vicious cycle that repeats itself, like with poverty and other forms of violence as well. This kind of transitions me into my second discipline that I used. That discipline that I used is psychology. Psychology helps us in researching this problem by looking at how external factors, which is what sociology talks about, how those external factors internally influence the child. We've all heard of Piaget's cognitive development theory that goes through the stages of child development. That starts off with sensory or motor, which the child learns by using senses to do things. Okay, we also now we go into the pre-operational where the student, well, the child, I'm sorry, who becomes a student starts to use language and symbols. This is when the child starts really taking in information. It's like a 2-year-old kid. You know, it's going, you might say a little dirty word, and of course that's what the kid's going to repeat. And they're watching and they're learning. Then you go into the concrete operation stage. The child uses cause and effect to learn. This leads us into formal operations. This is when the child is now becoming an adolescent. They begin abstract thinking. Okay, and the things that they saw as a young child are what they're using for their thought process now. They're starting to really act out what they've learned. A physical or emotional trauma can really stunt a child's development in the early stages. Genge in 2014 found that 22% of children have some sort of emotional or behavioral condition. An example of one such of these conditions is depression. Okay, Brooks, Iverson, Sherman, and Robiget 2010 found that depression stunts cognitive development. We see now a lot of these shootings that are happening in the schools. A lot of these kids have some sort of mental disorder, and a lot of them are on some kind of psychotic drug, something like lithium, of that nature. I know that's one that's a pretty strong dose of medicine, and sometimes when they're taking it correctly, they still might have a bad reaction. Or really, what happens is when they quit taking it, they start having the mood swings, violent mood swings. And the final discipline that I use to research the behavioral problem issue is political science. I can't stress this enough, how much politics affects our daily lives. Everything around us is affected by politics. I know a lot of people choose not to vote. It's not really relevant to this research, but it is in a way, because the people who we are electing and putting in office are turning around. They're on the school boards. You know, we're electing these people to the school boards, and they're making the policy in the schools. We're electing our representatives and our governors. They're the ones who are controlling the economic purses. And in Mississippi, public schools, which ranks at the bottom of pretty much every category in public education, has not been fully funded in quite some time now. When you're talking about going and helping students with behavioral problems, this is going to take money. This is going to take policy changes to institute some action. One thing that's used to identify students with behavioral problems is functional behavior assessment. Okay, this is where a teacher or an administrator at the school sees a child that's having some maybe just academic problems, or most often behavioral problems. They go to the behavior interventionist. The behavior interventionist makes this assessment plan by observing the students. They come up with a plan. They talk with the parents. They talk with the student. They get them on this plan. They get a lot of one-on-one interaction. To me, this is the key in this. You're getting a lot of one-on-one interaction with the student. You let them know you're there for them. Showing them what they need to do to succeed, putting them on a plan, going step by step. We're setting goals. Once we attain one goal, we go to another. But the thing about this is, not all schools have behavior interventionists. This is something that's becoming more and more common in schools because the need is so high. I know some educators in Lauderdale County. One's a principal at a middle school in Lauderdale County. His school had behavior interventionists because they get a lot of title money. But none of the other schools had them. Now a couple of them do. But the need is just so great, and Mississippi is so far behind because our funding is so low, and that's why this is a political solution needed to be had here. In my research, I did some interviews with 2 teachers in the Lauderdale County public school system. about. I mean, I did the research, reading the articles, looking online, but I wanted some firsthand knowledge from people who are in the trenches every day. And the teachers told me the behavioral problems are definitely increasing in nature. Both of them have been teaching for at least 5 years in the public school system, and they said over those 5 years, gang activity has increased, parental involvement has decreased. This definitely coincides with each other. A parent who is less involved in their students' academic, emotional well-being, that student is kind of left to fend for themselves, and the road that leads to a behavioral problem, it becomes an easy one to take. Maybe not intentionally. I don't think they set out to go down that road, but it happens anyway. And these teachers, after interviewing them, I'm very concerned about what's being done in the public school system to combat behavioral problems. They claim that the discipline is not there. I mean, kids, I know someone else's kind of research is kind of the same as mine as far as the topic goes, and they talked about how out of school suspension is pretty much a joke to these students, and it is. I mean, you're talking about a student who doesn't mind fighting in school, maybe using drugs on campus. You're going to give them out of school suspension? That's a free holiday. I mean, I think the schools need to start instituting some different kinds of punishment. I'm not talking about corporal punishment to a high school student. I don't think that's going to get your point across. But maybe some community service might be good. Cleaning up the school. I mean, we're not going to give you a free day just to go sit at home and do nothing. I know I'm starting to kind of rant there. Let me bring it back. But another solution that I think would get a lot of blowback, but I think we're there in society where we need it, is to force parents to be held accountable for the actions of their children. I mean, these teachers and the principal that I know have told me that PTA meetings are pretty much no one there, or when you have a after school conference, parent teacher conference day. I had one teacher, she said she has over 100 kids and maybe 15 or 20 parents come, and the parents that come are mostly the A and B students. So there you have it. High parental involvement, kids with high grades. Low parental involvement, kids with low grades and behavioral problems. And the government, a lot of people are going to say, well, you don't need the government to intervene in how I raise my children. Well, the government already intervenes in every aspect of our life. You have to wear a seatbelt, don't you? You're in your own personal car. You gotta wear a seatbelt. You gotta pay taxes. You gotta do this. You gotta do that. It's not a far step for the government to come in and say, parents, if your child has an altercation at school, you must come meet with the students. With the parents on the PTA meeting, the teachers, and the administrators, especially the administrators and the teachers, to see how we can get your student back on track. I know this problem has really become something that I've taken a lot of interest in over the past couple of years because I'm such good friends with a lot of educators. And these students that are young now, even elementary, these are the people who are going to be caring for us when we're older. When we turn gray and we're in a nursing home, these are the students these once students are going to be the ones out there having jobs, working, putting into the social security system, and this is how we are going to survive as we're older. And if we don't address these problems now, I think society is in for a lot of trouble. But thank you for your time listening to me. I hope this was informative. I hope this maybe turned you on to the behavioral problem issues in schools. And I'll be looking forward to turning in my final paper next week. And good luck to everyone. Have a good evening.